Somewhere in the dry silence of the ancient Near East, beneath layers of collapsed mud brick and the accumulated dust of 4,000 years, a clay tablet was pressed into the earth by hands that believed what they were recording was not mythology, but memory. A memory of the heavens as they once were, of a cosmos arranged differently than the one we now observe, of a God so vast and so violent that a single act of divine will reshaped the architecture of the sky itself. When scholars first pressed their fingers against the cuneiform impressions baked into that tablet's surface, what they found was not a poem or a prayer, but something far more unsettling. A cosmological account that described a world between worlds. A body in the heavens whose name appears in the oldest astronomical records ever committed to clay, and whose absence from the sky above has never, in the 4 millennia since that tablet was inscribed, been fully or satisfactorily explained. What were these ancient people recording, and why does the pattern of the heavens they described haunt every serious scholar who commits years to reading what they left behind? The civilization that produced this tablet was among the oldest sustained urban cultures the human world has ever known, rising from the alluvial plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. With no natural mountain barriers, no dramatic coastal geography to fix the seasons, the people of ancient Sumer became among the most sophisticated naked-eye astronomers the ancient world ever produced, watching the movements of celestial bodies with a precision that later civilizations would inherit and build upon, tracking planetary cycles across decades and centuries in clay archives that constituted the most extensive astronomical record of the ancient world. The Sumerians did not draw a clean distinction between astronomy and theology, between the observation of the sky and the narration of divine will, because for them, the heavens were not a mechanical system indifferent to human life, but a living text written by gods. Every planet visible to the naked eye was understood to be the embodiment or vehicle of a specific deity, whose character and mythology shaped how its movements were interpreted. Saturn carried one meaning, Venus another, Mars yet another. The ancient scribes who tracked these bodies were simultaneously priests, scholars, and storytellers, their clay tablets serving as both astronomical log and sacred narrative, both precise record and mythological archive. Which is why the document at the center of this story resists any reading that tries to separate its scientific content from its theological one, because for the people who made it, no such separation existed or would have made sense. Among the most significant of all Sumerian cosmological texts is a work that scholars have titled the Enuma Elish, a Babylonian creation epic whose roots extend back into Sumerian mythological tradition, which describes the formation of the known heavens through an act of cosmic violence, the destruction and dismemberment of a primordial being by the god Marduk, the great patron deity of Babylon, and which describes the formation of the present arrangement of sky, earth, and sea as deriving from the splitting and reshaping of Tiamat's defeated body across the heavens. Certain scholars of the mid-20th century proposed that this narrative was not purely allegorical, but represented an ancient astronomical memory of a collision or catastrophe involving a large body in the heavens, a large body in the region of the solar system between what Sumerian astronomers identified as the 4th and 5th Great Wandering Lights, the wandering lights that later civilizations named Mars and Jupiter. While it must be stated clearly that this interpretation is not accepted by mainstream scholarship, and that the overwhelming consensus among Assyriologists is that the Enuma Elish is a theological narrative rather than an astronomical record, the hypothesis has nonetheless generated a sustained and serious conversation about how ancient peoples encoded cosmological belief and whether mythological narratives can carry within them traces of genuine observational knowledge. Ask yourself, as any honest student of the ancient world must, what exactly drove a civilization with no telescopes and no observational tools beyond the naked human eye to develop one of the most precise planetary tracking systems in the ancient world. Their Venus observations, recorded in what scholars call the Enuma Anu Enlil tablets, tracked that planet's movements with an accuracy that astonishes those who study them. And whether a culture of such disciplined observational practice might have preserved within its mythology the echo of something witnessed, catalogued, and then mythologized across centuries of oral transmission before it was finally pressed into clay, something witnessed, something real enough to remember, and strange enough to require a god to explain. The Anunnaki, those divine beings whose name appears throughout Sumerian and Akkadian textual tradition, and whose role in the cosmic order was central to Mesopotamian theological understanding, were described in various texts as beings of celestial origin, whose decisions shaped the fate of the earth and its peoples. They were not simply metaphors or allegorical constructions, but understood by the Sumerians as real actors in a real cosmic drama. And the tablets that describe their functions, their hierarchies, and their interventions in human and cosmic affairs constitute a body of literature whose symbolic and theological complexity has occupied scholars for over a century and a half without reaching anything approaching full consensus on its meaning, which is itself a remarkable fact about a civilization that collapsed more than 2,000 years ago, that it retains the power to generate genuine scholarly disagreement about what it was trying to say. The specific celestial references in several Sumerian and Akkadian astronomical texts have been interpreted by various scholars as referring to a region of the sky associated with a body described in terms that do not correspond clearly to any of the known planets. Some readings of the term Nibiru suggest it refers to a specific celestial crossing point or transit rather than a physical body, while others have argued it designates a specific planet whose identity remains debated. What is not in dispute is that the Sumerians and their Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian successors had a sophisticated and detailed understanding of the celestial sphere, identifying and naming the major wandering bodies visible to the naked eye, tracking these bodies across generations with remarkable precision, and their mythological tradition described the current arrangement of the heavens as the result of a prior divine act of destruction and reorganization, which is, at minimum, a cosmological narrative that imagines the heavens as contingent, as having once been different, as being the outcome of events rather than simply the permanent and unalterable backdrop of existence. And that imaginative framework, whatever its ultimate relationship to observational reality, represents a form of cosmological thinking whose sophistication continues to command respect. The deepest mystery of these tablets is not whether they encode literal astronomical data or purely theological allegory, but rather Sumerian prayed and defined and prayed, and river valleys of ancient Iraq came to develop a picture of the cosmos so vast, so detailed, and so strangely resonant, still finding new interpretive angles in the same pressed clay, still returning to the same cuneiform signs with new translations and new frameworks, and still unable to say with certainty that they have heard everything these ancient voices were trying to say. Consider what it means for something committed to clay to survive 4,000 years, to survive the collapse of the civilization that made it, the conquest of its cities, the silting of its rivers, the erosion of every other aspect of its material culture, still arriving in human hands, legible enough to argue about, still containing within its angular impressions a cosmological vision elaborate enough to generate books, theories, and careers. The tablet does not give up its final meaning easily, and perhaps that resistance is itself the most ancient and most honest thing about it. A civilization speaking across an abyss of time in a language that can be translated but perhaps never fully heard, describing heavens that may once have looked different from the heavens above us now, invoking a god whose violence remade the sky and leaving behind in fired clay the stubborn, patient, unresolved question of whether the cosmos we inhabit is the original one, or only what survived the last great act of a divine hand. moving through the dark.